There's nothing quite like the feeling of watching your campaign fall apart at the hands of a magic item that you gave to your players yourself. And I find that usually it's not that enjoyable for the players either. Welcome to Constructed Chaos. Today we're going to be looking at 5 campaign-breaking magic items that you may want to think twice about before adding to your game. First off, I think it's important to recognize that these items should not necessarily just be outright blacklisted from your campaigns. Rather, I think it's important to know the possibilities and the implications of putting these items into your game before adding them in, and perhaps possibly even tweaking them a bit so that they don't cause problems for you and your players down the road. So with respect to that, I'll be talking briefly about what each magic item does, as well as giving some helpful hints on how to change up these game-breaking effects so that they become tools for intrigue and adventure as opposed to sources of regret. First up on our list, we have the Instant Fortress. This unassuming 1-inch metal cube can expand into a tower of immense size and can become a bit of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to protecting your allies, defeating enemies, and solving puzzles. By placing the cube on the ground and speaking its command word, you deploy a square adamantine tower with 20-foot sides and 30 feet of height that is immune to being tipped over because of its innate magic. It's also immune to spells like knock, and the doors only open at your command. But we're not done yet. Creatures within its spawning area also take 10d10 bludgeoning damage unless they make a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, in which case they still take half of that damage. That's still 5d10. I'm sure you can think of plenty of uses for this item right off the bat, but I promise your players will be even more creative than you anticipate. From intentionally spawning the tower within another structure to destroy it, to creating a flying fortress using at least 1 square inch of earth and the immovable rod, this magic item will create problems in your campaign you didn't know you were gonna have. However, this is one of the only magic items on this list that I wouldn't tamper with very much before deploying it in one of my own campaigns. Sure, you don't want your level 3 party to be able to deal 10d10 bludgeoning damage whenever they feel like it. But in later levels, 10d10 damage, while still a lot, is not quite as much, especially whenever there's a DC 15 dexterity saving throw attached to that damage. I would suggest maybe just deploying this magic item and giving it to your party whenever they're at like 10th level. By then, they'll have solutions for a lot of the problems that this magic item solves anyway, but it'll still allow them to be creative with it. I would never want to deprive my party of the creativity to solve problems in an interesting way. As a matter of fact, it's one of my favorite parts of DMing. So by all means, throw the Instant Fortress into your campaign and see what hilarity ensues. At number 4 on our list, we have the Cubic Gate and the Amulet of Planes. Both of these magic items are similar in that they allow your players to move unhindered between the planes of existence. This can be problematic for several reasons, especially in the early game, but least of which is trying to plan a session when you have no idea where your players are going to end up. But outside of that, issues persist even in the later game when your players can use these items a minimum of 3 times with full charges as a quick and easy escape plan, or even a way to banish any enemy into another plane in the case of the Cubic Gate. Your players could even end up drowned or burned to a crisp by teleporting to the wrong plane just from one roll of the dice. Now, I love including multiple planes of existence in my campaign, so it's hard for me to just rule these items out entirely. And I find that in most cases, fixing these overpowered magic items can be done just by giving the magic items a little bit of personality. I'm not suggesting items that speak to the players directly, but rather items that have a little bit of their own will baked into them. Perhaps the magic item only sends the players where they need to be and not necessarily where they want to go. Maybe the magic item only works spontaneously outside of the player's control every once in a while, and at other times it's on the fritz. Perhaps it's the whole reason your campaign began in the first place. Next, I want you to imagine building your entire campaign towards one final encounter with the BBEG, the arch enemy of the party. Just as you cue the epic battle music, one of your players takes out an item and instantly vanquishes their foe. If that sounds overpowered to you, well, that's exactly what this item can do. Sandwiched in the middle, at number 3, is the Talisman of Pure Good. As a magic item with 7 charges, it allows you to force an evil-aligned target on the ground within 120 feet of you to make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw, or else the ground opens up, they are swallowed whole, and consequently vanquished. And if it doesn't work once, well, you have 6 other charges to use. It even gives you a +2 to your spell attack bonus if you're a good aligned cleric or paladin. This item very easily could have been at the top of our list without a few notable caveats. First, you have to be a good aligned character to even use the item without taking a minimum of 66 radiant damage just for touching it. Second, the item doesn't work on flying creatures, so using this on an enemy that knows about it or has the ability to fly really brings the magic item back down to earth, pun intended. Being the DM, I do find that the most important thing is just to be aware of this item's imminent presence in your party's repertoire. What also could help is lowering the number of charges it has from 7 down to no more than 3. The item doesn't regain charges after all, and does disintegrate in a wave of light after all those charges are depleted. The inclusion of an item like this with a lower number of charges could be a really fun way to introduce an option for disposing of a particularly vile foe. I would, however, still be hesitant to introduce it right before a fight with the BBEG of the entire campaign. Next, we'll add 3 pretty obvious entries to our list in the Efreeti bottle, the Luck Blade, and the Ring of 3 Wishes. Allowing your players to cast the 9th level spell at will offers some pretty limitless potential, and as such gives you pretty limitless problems as the DM, unable to predict what they might wish for. Chaos and Calamity, however, are not always such a bad thing. Introducing one of these items at the very end of your campaign could be a really great way to start a brand new one. The implications of what your players wish for could start fires or spark rebellion in different parts of the campaign world that you can follow up with. But what if you want to wow your players in the middle of your campaign? How do you introduce these items without breaking the whole world before your journey ends? In cases like this, I find it could be useful to change the very nature of the wishes themselves. I'm not talking about a monkey paw where you change what the players want into a punishment for them, but instead making the wishes less about instant gratification and more about supplying the adventurers with tools to make their wishes a reality. Want to defeat the big bad evil guy? Here's a +2 axe for your barbarian. Want to revive a player character or an NPC? Here's an orb that contains their essence, and you now need to seek out an empty vessel for them to take hold and be born anew into the campaign world. Changes like this could even bring about new side quests and adventures for the players to explore on their way to completing the campaign without wrecking it. Before I reveal the last item on our list, I would like to give a few honorable mentions to items that didn't quite make it. All these items weren't included because on their own they're not simply broken enough. They can be broken if players exploit their abilities, but to that end, they fall well within the realm of the DM saying that they don't work that way. The Dust of Dryness, the Helm of Teleportation, the Sphere of Annihilation, the Cloak of Invisibility, and last, the Immovable Rod are all items that you should look over twice before you add into your campaign haphazardly. And at the end of our list comes an infamous item that should be no surprise, the Deck of Many Things. Without a doubt, you've heard of this one. The seemingly mundane deck of cards that unleashes wild and powerful magics upon drawing from it. Nearly everyone who's played D&D has a story to tell about this magic item, and most of them are a mixed bag of good, great, and outright terrible. I'll often include this magic item at the end of a one-shot or pre-written campaigns that you can find online because I find that most of the time players are not so attached to those characters, but I would never use this magic item in one of my long-running campaigns, especially not in the middle of it. Even if each player at your table only drew one card from the deck, someone's gonna end up with a bad outcome, resulting in death or even worse. Yes, there are worse things than death in D&D. Even still, this is one of the only magic items that I would have trouble tampering with before adding into my campaign. Let me explain. Sure, you could remove all the extremely detrimental cards from the deck so that your players only get really good or mildly bad results, but I find that this removes the allure of the deck of many things as well. If your players discover that there's no inherent risk from pulling from the deck, what's to say this is any different from granting them wishes at the end of the campaign? I feel that tampering with this legendary magic item removes any possibility for interesting stories that result from it, and so diminishes the enjoyment that your players could have from the magic item being in the campaign. So I guess some magic items are just too good and too powerful to mess with. The deck of many things definitely fits the bill in that respect, and so maybe it could serve as a way to intentionally break your campaign. I'm not saying to just throw it in whenever you feel like, but if things need to be spiced up, that's definitely one way to do it. And so with that, we complete our list of campaign-wrecking magical items. If you've enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button on your way out, and until next time, go out there and make some chaos.